Hi, I'm Versha Sharm, the senior correspondent at NowThis, and I'm thrilled to be talking today to David Cole, who is the legal director for the American Civil Liberties Union, an organization that is perhaps busier than ever right now. So thank you for taking the time. David is the author of Engines of Liberty: The Power of Citizen Activists to Make Constitutional Law, which is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. So we're very close to the end of this election now. Millions of Americans have already voted, whether by mail, absentee ballots, or early voting. What is the priority for the ACLU right now, and what should citizens and voters be thinking about in terms of the next couple of weeks?
Vote, vote, vote. We at the ACLU, we're a nonpartisan organization, but we're an organization that believes in democracy, and that requires that people vote. It's the most powerful tool we have as citizens to affect the policies of our government and our future. But it only is a tool that works for us if we actually deploy it. And so it is absolutely critical that people get out there and vote. And so we at the ACLU are encouraging people to vote, educating people on how they can, get registered and how they can vote. What are the various options for them? We're urging people to get out there to the polls. We're urging people to urge their friends and their family to get out to the polls. And we're urging people, most importantly, to vote like your rights depend on it, because they do.
Speaking of rights, then, I think we're seeing record turnout in a lot of places already. We're also seeing some obstacles to making sure that every vote is being counted. So, what should people keep in mind regarding that?
Well, the premise of a democracy is that the people get to decide, the people get to vote. And so government should be making it easy for people to vote, not hard for people to vote. We have, at the ACLU, have fought both in the courts and in the legislatures and before election commissions to get rid of obstacles to voting that are unnecessary. Voter ID laws, witness requirements for mail-in ballots during the pandemic that would require you to go to somebody else and expose yourself to somebody else in order to get them to sign a form. Those sorts of things should not be part of the system in a pandemic. And so we are suing to get rid of a lot of those obstacles. But what's most important is that people understand what the rules are in their state, because they vary from state to state, and that they use their right to vote.
You mentioned lawsuits. I understand that the Republicans expanded their legal defense fund to some $20 million earlier this summer when we're talking about litigation in the courts. And I know the Democrats have some money set aside for this as well. Why is that even necessary, and what can citizens do about it?
Well, this is something that obviously will be very consequential for many people, right? Who gets elected, and a lot of people have a lot at stake, and so both sides have geared up to fight it out in the courts if need be, and we also will fight it out in the courts if need be. We're not fighting on behalf of the Republicans or on behalf of the Democrats. We're fighting on behalf of the American people, to make sure that they have the right to vote and that they have the right to have their votes counted.
That is one thing I think we're trying to prepare our audience for, is we very well may not know who the actual winner is on November 3rd, right? It's going to take some time to count all of these ballots.
That's right. And, that's partly because never before have we had so many absentee ballots, so many mail-in ballots. There are some states, 5 states, that have gone to virtually 100% mail-in ballots long before this. And so they know how to do it. They're all set up to do it. But many of the states relied principally on voters going to the polls and some absentee ballots. In the pandemic, many of those states are going to have a massively increased number of absentee ballots, and they may not have the infrastructure to count them as quickly as they need to do. There are some states where you can't start counting the mail-in ballots until Election Day, which means that they're very unlikely to be done counting by the close of the polls that day. So it is often the case that you don't know the results for sometimes several days, sometimes more than a week after the election takes place. But if that's what's necessary to count all the ballots, it's more important that we count all the ballots than that we know what the outcome is on November 3rd.
Now, one major issue I think that is motivating a lot of voters right now is the unexpected Supreme Court vacancy that we now have with the tragic passing of the late Justice Ginsburg. Justices Alito and Thomas also recently wrote in opposition of the 2015 marriage equality case, which of course understandably caused alarm among a lot of LGBTQ Americans. What is your take on what's at stake, what's being threatened? What are you most worried about?
So, to get a sense of what's at stake with respect to the next appointment to the Supreme Court, you only have to look at how many important cases have been decided in the last 15, 20 years by 5-4 votes, with Justice Ginsburg in the 5-justice majority. And they include decisions to protect abortion rights, to protect LGBT equality, to extend marriage to all folks on equal terms, to uphold affirmative action, to uphold the Affordable Care Act, 5-4. So that's all of that is at stake in this nomination, which will take a seat vacated by a civil rights hero, someone who literally got the court to recognize that sex discrimination violates the Constitution when she was an ACLU lawyer, and put in her place a very hard right conservative. That's going to change the balance of power on the court in a significant way.
Now, I think a main takeaway of your book is that all politics is local, and that while we should be paying attention to these major national issues and decisions, people should also really be engaged at a local level as well. So can you talk about why that's important?
So absolutely. So, when we think about constitutional rights, take marriage equality, right? Marriage equality, how did marriage equality come about? The Supreme Court in 2015 recognized that the Constitution gives same-sex couples the same right as opposite-sex couples to get married. But it wasn't the Supreme Court that gave us that. It wasn't even the lawyers before the court who made the arguments that led the court to reach that result. It was the work of citizens around this country coming together in all sorts of organizations that were seeking to advance LGBT equality and dignity, working at the local level to advance the conception of equality and dignity for LGBT people. And they did it in boardrooms, getting companies to extend domestic partnership benefits. They did it in state family court, getting family law revised so that same-sex couples could adopt children. They did it by getting city councils to adopt regulations to prohibit discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. And then they did it in state courts, seeking first in Vermont, then in Massachusetts, then in Connecticut, a right to same-sex marriage. And only after they had sort of developed the momentum of all those wins in all those different forums was it possible to win that case in the Supreme Court. And so liberty is really the charge of all of us. We can all be guardians of liberty, and the way we are guardians of liberty is by organizing and associating with like-minded citizens around the issues that we care about, and standing up and speaking out and working together for those rights. And if you do that, you can change the world.
The times are overwhelming right now. It's been a really tough year. It's been a really tough couple of years for people. What gives you hope right now?
So what gives me hope is the response we have seen ever since President Trump was elected. And the response is, I think, a response that shows that American citizens understand the power of civil society, the importance of standing up and standing together. And I see that in the Women's March, the single largest march in American history, in the crowds that went out to airports to protest the Muslim ban. Tens of thousands of Americans went out to protest that. To the crowds that protested his efforts to repeal the Affordable Care Act and take away health insurance for poor people, which succeeded in barring him from being able to do that. To the March for Our Lives movement, sparked by the Parkland shooting, but has become a national youth-led movement for gun control, to the Me Too movement. I mean, sexual harassment has been around for a long time, but it was in the Trump era that people came together and said, we're going to do something about it. And they really have. To the Black Lives Matter protests on the streets today in response to George Floyd and systemic inequality in this country. I think if any one of those movements had occurred in the last 4 years, we would say, wow, that's remarkable. But that all of those movements have risen up, I think, is a reflection of the health of our citizenry, the resolve of people to get engaged and to fight for the values that they believe in. And at the end of the day, that's what builds hope. Hope is built by action. So you take action and you create hope. And people are doing that. And so I'm very hopeful.
I think that's a great message, and it has been remarkable to see the protests this summer going into this fall, and especially how the next generation, a new generation of people are stepping up and leading those protests. So David, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. My pleasure.